Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part there for the 9th of October 2025. I'm going to start, as we normally do, with the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. We have over 1,000 personnel lost again, so that's, I think, 4 days over 1,000 consistently, but every other category is very low. One single tank, one single troop carrying AFV, 15 artillery systems, that's actually below the daily average, and 55 vehicles and fuel tanks. That is lower than the kind of arbitrary 100 threshold that we were used to seeing. Numbers above that. Now, I don't know what this suggests, whether weather is playing a role, whether the Ukrainians and or the Russians are not attacking so much along the front line, whether it is quietening down as people are culminating, getting exhausted, running out of resources, troops, so on and so forth. A few nuggets to add to the personnel side of things. Russian troops were ordered to storm Ukrainian positions at any cost, said Zelensky yesterday. The president reported that after this, the enemy's losses increased sharply in the Pokrovsk direction alone. SBU destroys more than 100 occupiers per every day. And over the past month, CSOA, is at the Alpha team, eliminated 3,028 Russians. Pretty incredible numbers there. So Pokrovsk is a very expensive place for the Russians. It's interesting that this interview of an Indian chap who was taken prisoner, an Indian student who was sort of, I guess, press ganged or convinced into the armed forces. He was then captured. This is now blowing up around India in a way that needs to happen, actually. Reports have started appearing on Indian TV, says Anton Gerashenko, about Russia luring Indian citizens and forcing them to fight in its war against Ukraine. After the detention of an Indian student who had been sent to the front by Russians but surrendered to Ukrainian forces, the issue finally exploded into the public attention, says Anton Gerashenko. India's a big place. I don't know if it's exploded into the public attention, but it's the sort of thing that needs to be on the news far more frequently in India, and they need to work hard not to let Indians find their way to the front lines. Now, an indication of Russian losses might be this: the maternity hospital number 5 in Omsk has been converted into a military hospital for injured soldiers. It could reflect both failing birth rates and increasing mortality rates. So that there's another data point. And during counter-battery operations in Donetsk region, Ukraine's 55th Artillery Brigade uncovered and destroyed some relics, including an ML-20 howitzer produced in the USSR before World War II. And we've talked a lot about old bits of kit finding their way to the front line, but it has to tell you something if they are fielding pieces of kit that predate World War II. It's not ideal, even if those bits of kit can do damage. Right, Russian anti-aircraft FPV operators are shooting down Ukrainian long-range strike drones based on light engine aircraft. This ties in with my claims that the Russians are having success in downing long-range drones, long-range Ukrainian drones. These are probably the Foxbat, A-22 Foxbat, the light aircraft that are turned into drones. Here we appear to see a whole range of these drones getting taken down by counter drone drones. It's funny to call these drones. They are large. Well, they're not large aeroplanes. They're very large drones or very small aeroplanes. This is an issue for the Ukrainians. The Russians are, I think, probably adapting and getting better at taking down drones, and I think a huge proportion of the Ukrainian drones sent into Russia are indeed intercepted in one way or another. Drones on the front line, the FPV drones, are continuing to have huge impact on logistics. Here you can see a couple of examples of anti-drone net corridors, tunnels, if you like, along roads that are seeking to provide frontline towns with supplies And then the Russians, again, having success in striking an awful lot at the moment, I think, in terms of their Shahed drones, hitting gas facilities, energy facilities, thermal power plants, but also locomotives and rail infrastructure is being very much targeted. Russia's defense ministry shared footage of a Ukrainian locomotive being tracked and hit. Attacks on rail infrastructure have surged, prompting expert Flash Shahid to warn that locomotives may become prime targets as their loss halts train movement and strains equipment and personnel supply. You've seen the Russians not focus too much on railway logistics. I don't know if that was a kind of unwritten rule between the two sides. And then the Ukrainians started really ramping up train logistics strikes sort of over the last 6 months. And last month, I think you've seen Russia do similarly. I am pretty worried for Ukraine at the moment. I think the strikes on energy infrastructure and railway infrastructure is deeply problematic. Gas infrastructure that has been hit recently is causing Ukraine to massively ramp up imports of gas to the tune of 1.9 billion euros. That is 1.9 billion euros they could be spending on weapons. Russia has had tremendous success over the last few months in terms of really hitting a lot of targets in Ukraine. And though Ukraine is having their own success, this is a game of attrition. It's a game of troop and equipment attrition on the front lines. It's a game of energy and hydrocarbons and logistics chicken. Where who pulls out first? Who is the most resilient when it comes to continued strikes on these different domains? I do worry at the moment. I think Russia is turning the screw to some degree, and that's why I keep talking about Yelabuga getting hit. Ukraine has to take out Yelabuga. 112 drones were sent into Ukraine last night. 3 were still flying at the time that this infographic was compiled. 87 of the 109 were shot down or intercepted by electronic warfare. That's an 80% interception rate, but that still does give 9 and 13, 22 getting through, although I don't know if that's 3, so maybe 19 at the best getting through. 22 hits striking 12 different locations. That is cumulatively a problem for Ukraine for sure. Max 25 talks here about, well, this is coming from Deputy Head of the Ministry of Health. Russia uses at least 3 different models of Shaheds in which significant differences in the composition of imported components have been identified. I don't know why the Ministry of Health is getting involved here. The Alabuga Shahed imported components 294 units, China and Taiwan 120, US 100, of which that is the case. The Izhevsk Shahed has 112 imported parts, 40 each from China and Taiwan, and the US, the rest from other countries. And the Iranian Shahed contains about 105 imported components, of which 40 are from the US, the rest from other countries. That is something of a concern there. Last night, Odessa was particularly hard hit. At least 5 people injured in massive fires that took place there. The emergency services were very, very busy. Some pretty substantial raging fires on areas of logistics. I would have thought, again, how long can Ukraine keep sustaining these attacks? Firefighters were struck mid-rescue. Oh, that's actually not Odessa, that's Chernihiv. I don't know. That looks the same footage there. Oh no, this could have been elsewhere, Russian. Yeah. So firefighters were struck mid-rescue in Chernihiv when a second Shahed drone hit the same grocery store they had just responded to. I don't think that's the footage there. Elsewhere, Russian strikes killed 5 civilians and injured 17 across 6 regions. We have a claim here that Russian troops struck residential neighborhoods in daylight, leaving homes shattered. Less than an hour later, a Russian drone slammed into an apartment building. No military targets, no mistakes, just another act of terror against civilians, reports the Euromaidan press there, showing videos of residential properties on fire. Here is the claim about that. Oh no, this is the DTEC. There was a grocery store that was mentioned previously. I thought I had another claim about that grocery store. Anyway, moving on, Russia has attacked the second DTEC facility, so that's an energy company. In the past 24 hours, a factory in the Donetsk region where coal was enriched for thermal power plants was struck. This is a third attack on the facility, and it looks like it's in a lot of trouble there. It doesn't look like it's much of a facility anymore. So the energy sector is getting routinely hammered. This is the oil facility, the Preluki one, which I reported yesterday morning that was hit 2 nights ago. I think it was 2 nights, may have even been 3 nights. And that, serious fires there. That it was an oil depot that I don't think is containing so much oil anymore. As you can see, it's burning off there with impressive gusto, and that is going to hurt Ukraine big time. So Ukraine has done a really good job of hitting Russian depots and refineries and continued to do so last night, but the Ukrainians are suffering themselves. Bloomberg's reported that the recent Russian strikes have destroyed over half of Ukraine's domestic gas production, forcing Kyiv to seek emergency fuel imports worth about 1.9 billion euros to get through the winter. Just to get through the winter in terms of heat, 1.9 billion euros. That money could have been spent on huge amounts of weaponry. This is how much Russia is hurting Ukraine at the moment. According to sources, a massive October the 3rd attacks wiped out roughly 60% of national output. So we talk about the success Ukraine has had on the hydrocarbon sector in Russia. Some people talk about 20, 30, 40% of their output. Just in one night, 60% of Ukraine's gas output was taken out. And the opportunity cost of not being able to acquire all of those weapons, that's huge. Okay, on to Ukrainian strikes from last night. 2 facilities near Kosovo were attacked. Yefimovka linear oil pumping station, and I think 8 kilometers away, something like that, Korobkovsky gas processing plant was hit. We're going to hear more about that gas processing plant in next. So anyway, here you have night drones hitting a Russian gas processing plant in Kosovo, Volgograd region. The Yefimovka oil pumping station, located 8.5 kilometers to the south, was also targeted. Red glow in Russia's Volgograd region. That's that gas processing plant taking a hit. That's Tim White. And now Igor Sushko says Ukrainian drones struck the Lukoil Korobkovsky gas processing plant in Kosovo, Volgograd. This key facility was processing several billion cubic meters of gas and raw gas annually, converting it to usable natural gas, propane, butane, etc. And there it is flashing up in the night sky. Ukrainian Special Operations also confirmed, says no reports, they carried out deep strike attacks overnight on Lukoil's Korobkovsky gas processing plant and that Yefimovka dispatch station. The Korobkovsky facility handles up to 450 million cubic meters of natural and associated gas annually, and there is video footage of it. I think, here it is. In the daytime there. So some more information here. The Yefimovka LVDS is a station that serves several main lines for the transportation of oil and petroleum products. Processes, or 40 million tons per year is pumped through there. Korobkovsky, any other information there? 450 million cubic meters of natural and associated gas per year, and 186,000 tons of broad fraction light hydrocarbons per year. So the Ukrainians systematically going after these facilities. Here you can see in the morning it is still on fire. They're trying to put it out. Here is a video from Korobkovsky, the gas processing plant, 200 kilometers north of Volgograd city. So a fair distance away. NASA's fire monitoring system picked up those 2 hits, as we've seen already on their firm's analysis. So that possibly quite significant. It depends what the damage there is. There are some claims that that is fairly substantial damage to that facility, but it's hard for us to be particularly sure at the moment. Now, something else happened yesterday. A major fire broke out in Novosibirsk. This was a big old fire. According to local media, reports suggest the blaze may be at a facility producing electronics and microchips. Hashtag Russia on fire. Was that struck? Was it sabotage? There, you can see it from a different direction. A fire broke out the premises of ZAO Zavod Pripoyev, a plant specializing in electronics and microchip production, repair and assembly of electrical devices, and does work for the defense industry, soldering components for weapons, communications and radio electronics. So that looks like a pretty successful outcome for the Ukrainians, although we don't really know, how it started, whether it's a strike, whether it's a careless smoker, whether it was sabotage. I think accidents are the least probable explanation. These are far too commonplace to be accidents, I think. And more footage there from a different direction. It really was a big old fire. So the Ukrainians have this happening quite a bit in Russia, for whatever reason caused it. The Russians are losing quite a few facilities within the military industrial complex and associated sort of adjacent sectors. Russia makes blackouts, says Zelensky. It will get a response. Ukraine has the ability to hit Kursk and Belgorod regions. Interesting that he sort of just talks about those two. This is the ability, I guess, to use shorter range weapons against them, like HIMARS. There were claims the other night that Belgorod city was being targeted by HIMARS, and that gives them really pinpoint accuracy and probably cheaper for them to do so. That is a bit of a shot across the bow for the Russians there, that if you give us blackouts, we'll deal some pain out to Kursk and Belgorod. Zelensky said, regarding our strikes deep into Russia, that is our response to Russian strikes, we understand that Ust-Luga, Primorsk are achievable. That's up in St. Petersburg. They've hit them a number of times, and there's another shot across the bow. We could do it again. What happened is really a great success. The enemy's gasoline deficit is up to 20% of the need, which is, the way I'd interpret that is it's operating 80%, that they have knocked out 20%. Or rather than it's down to 20%, their outputs. Zelensky's also said last week, I won't say how many, our pair of Neptune and Flamingo was used. So the Neptune there, that's the updated Neptune D cruise missile, but also the Flamingo, the FP5, that much larger piece of kit. They were apparently used last week. You can analyze the corresponding results yourself. 3 Flamingo cruise missiles were used during the strike on the Russian intelligence base in occupied Crimea, according to De Welt. Now, I don't know if this is referring to the same one where they hit the base that had some hovercrafts, because it sounds fairly similar. 2 missiles reached the target, and another one fell about 100 meters from it. The explosions formed craters and a diameter of up to 15 meters at the site. But that could have been that one that we already know quite a bit about. Some more details here from Null reports. Zelensky confirmed Ukraine's Ruta drone missile hit a Russian offshore platform over 250 kilometers away, and that has happened for the first time. The biggest success came from Lyuty and other Firepoint drones, so probably FP1 drones there, used en masse, up to 300 at once. Wow. And one must hope that Ukraine is having more success than the Russians are letting on, than even the Ukrainians are letting on, but it's trying to get battle damage assessment from these strikes and trying to work out how successful the Russians are at shooting Ukrainian weapons down. Ukrainian Neptune and Flamingo missiles have also been used, he confirmed, so that's the same kind of claim. And Tomahawk deliveries could force Russia to sober up and negotiate, Zelensky says. Right now, it's important to send a signal that Ukraine will be strengthened by all means possible. So some pretty robust talk there from Zelensky. doing a little bit of saber rattling, a few shots across Russia's bow. But I just think at the moment, while the Ukrainians are having some really impressive success in their strikes, the Russians are dealing out some pretty heavy blows in like top line facilities. I think Ukraine is probably having greater success in striking all sorts of different things. You look at Crimea, all the equipment that's been taken out there. Russia are just obliterating Ukraine's ability to produce gas. I mean, in one fell swoop. So, yeah. Now, talking of which, I mean, it's not to say that Ukraine aren't having their success, and indeed we know the hydrocarbons industry in Russia is really struggling. Belarus has quadrupled gasoline exports to Russia in September as Moscow faces a fuel shortage due to Ukrainian attacks on its energy infrastructure. Then, as we heard from Zelensky, according to our data, the fuel shortage in Russia is already approaching 20%. This is what concerns gasoline to them. A bit of a strange translation there. They are already using up the diesel reserves that they saved for a rainy day. Now, that is the interesting part of this particular statement. I've talked to you about how diesel is the more important product there because it's what industry relies on and it's what the military relies on. And if they can really hit diesel production and storage, then that's going to hurt. And if Zelensky's correct that they are using up their diesel reserves, it means that they're in trouble with diesel. And if that manifests in a really serious way, then that could hurt the war effort. Russia is objectively entering its worst economic phase since the start of the aggression against Ukraine, reports Le Monde. The economic boom, caused primarily by the war effort, is already in the past, and now Russian taxpayers will be forced to shoulder an increasing burden. The idea that the war economy is going to save them, get them out of a hole, that the GDP is doing really well because they're producing more and more tanks and IFVs, that is not going to last. And in fact, it's a fairly hollow stimulus for the Russians, and they're in trouble. Russian stock market suffered its steepest single-day decline in 3 years after a senior diplomat said that progress toward a potential peace deal had largely stalled. I reported that yesterday, that momentum had been exhausted, was I think the claim. According to the Moscow Times here, the Moscow exchange fell 4.05%, its lowest level since December 2024. Gazprom shares fell by 4.1%, Sberbank by 4.9%, VTB, another bank there, I think, by 4.7%, and Rosneft by 2.5%. Severstal and Aeroflot each plunged nearly 5%, while Rostelecom, Interrao and Magnitogorsk Iron and Steelworks shed more than 5%. And Mechel saw the steepest fall, down 6.7%. So stock market is in trouble. We have a real problematic economic phase, according to Le Monde, and we also have struggles with both gasoline and diesel there. Loads of reports still abound concerning petrol stations shutting down or not taking on deliveries of certain products. Then there is this is, I don't know the provenance of this claim, to be perfectly honest, so take it with a pinch of salt, but it looks like a Russian blogger being translated here. Russia is short of funds for pensions. The fund's deficit could reach 780 billion rubles in 2025, according to Vedomosti. Insurance premiums will only cover 70% of payments, and the budget will cover no more than a third. There's not enough money, and authorities in the compulsory medical insurance system are already discussing eliminating benefits for small businesses and introducing contributions even for the unemployed. It's looking desperate in Russia. Germany will give the police power to shoot down or disable rogue drones threatening security or air traffic, according to Reuters. The new law, awaiting parliamentary approval, allows methods like jamming or lasers and follows major disruptions at, for example, Munich airport. Now, Ursula von der Leyen of the EU says violation of EU airspace is a hybrid war by the Russian Federation. It's time to call a spade a spade. So hopefully that then turns into Europeans doing more explicitly against the Russians, as you can see from the German Parliament and their decision hopefully to change their rules. Ukraine's parliament has backed Zelensky's decision to deploy armed forces units abroad. The bill allows Ukrainian naval ships and crews to take part in NATO exercises and missions in Turkey and the UK. Indeed, as I've mentioned before, the Ukrainians want to send a corvette, the Hetman Ivan Mazepa, to Turkey. It's actually built in Turkey. I think that's where it is. But rather than have it sort of being tested and stay there while it's safe, they want it to be crewed with up to 106 servicemen. I don't know whether that'll stay in the Black Sea area or whether they'll move that out of the Black Sea. But of course, if they do, they won't be able to move it back in because of the Montreux Convention. Also, mine countermeasure ships used to be called sort of mine sweepers or mine hunters. Mine countermeasure ships with crews of up to 39 servicemen will be sent to the UK. The Cherkasy, the Chernihiv, the Mariupol, the Melitopol, and the Helichsk. The management of the division of mine countermeasure ships with a total number of up to 20 servicemen will also be sent to Great Britain. Really good news there. And I think this is all to do with, taking part, as mentioned here, with NATO exercises. It's about starting that integration into NATO, even though, at the moment we understand that they aren't going to be joining NATO anytime soon. Ukraine's parliament has also passed, at the first reading, a bill to create cyber forces within the armed forces. The new branch will operate under the direct command of the commander-in-chief and focus on defending military networks, leading cyber operations and cooperating with NATO. Then we hear that Japan is on alert as 3 Russian naval ships, push into the Philippine Sea amid deepening Moscow-Beijing cooperation. So the Philippines has been under an awful lot of threat from the Chinese militia, the maritime militia, and then the Coast Guards, which act as another arm of really the Chinese Navy, and then the Chinese Navy themselves. And now we have Russian naval ships also pushing into the Philippine Sea. So this is Russia helping China to push the envelope there with the neighbors of China. Really worrying. Also worrying is that Republican Representative Anna Paulina Luna, who is batshit crazy, by the way, and a very pro-Trump US lawmaker, is going to meet with Putin's envoy this month. What is going on there? So she said on October the 8th that she will meet with Kirill Dmitriev to discuss peace and trade. Luna opposes all US aid to Ukraine. Honestly, just put her on a Musk rocket and send her to space. Zelensky's cooperation with the US continues, or Zelensky says Ukrainian cooperation with the US continues. A team led by the Prime Minister, Svyridenko, together with Andriy Yermak from the presidential office and Vladislav Vlasiuk, will be in the US early next week. Apologies for my pronunciation. Topics to discuss will be air defense, energy, sanctions, steps, negotiation track, the issue of frozen assets, and all of that with the US will be discussed. Preparations are also underway to continue the work of the Coalition of the Willing. We will prepare, says Zelensky, our respective actions, meetings and results for October and November. I think that President Trump wants us to be at the negotiation table and that we support his track. I think that our meeting plus real facts, and this is the interesting part for me about what Max25 says to summarize what's happened. I think that our meeting plus real facts give him a broader understanding that the Russians are not selling him what they are capable of doing. This is the idea that Trump has bad intel on Ukraine. I think the Ukrainians Zelensky said the other day that there were maps provided essentially by the Russians that were just woefully inaccurate about what's going on. And Trump, again, it's this idea that Trump doesn't really understand what's going on in the war in Ukraine. And therefore, it's really important that there are these regular meetings between the Ukrainians and the Americans, meetings between the Europeans and NATO allies and the Trump administration. He says, Zelensky, it's very important that today, after our meeting, dialogue is taking place at various levels. That Russia isn't selling them what they are doing. That is so important. And I just want to do some adding up, joining the dots here. Now, you've just heard, no doubt, that Israel and Hamas are going to do this deal. It looks, well, here is the time that apparently, according to Reuters, that Donald Trump received the information on the deal. This suggests, and you wouldn't necessarily expect Trump to be involved in the intricacies of doing the deal, but you've got this situation whereby Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, comes in and informs Trump about the Gaza peace deal process here. We also understand that Rubio handed Trump a note, and people have been able to decipher what was said through the paper. Quote, you need to approve. This is a note from Marco Rubio to Donald Trump. You need to approve a Truth Social post so you can announce the deal first. Now, I've got an awful lot to say about Truth Social because it turns out that the message that Trump put out to Pam Bondi that seemed to be a private message, he accidentally put it on Truth Social and it got deleted. There's evidence now from investigations that was genuinely a private message. And then there are questions that about, with the whole Signalgate thing, it looks like Truth Social DMs, like Truth Social is being used as a formal communications platform for the government, and it's not encrypted. It's not safe enough. Anyway, there's all that. Plus, it also proves that Donald Trump was going after Comey and other political opponents and directing his Department of Justice to do that. That's all controversial, but it feeds into this idea as well. This one from Marco Rubio here feeds into the idea that Donald Trump isn't writing his Truth Social post. So that one about Ukraine that was written the other day that looks in very different language is a complete volte-face, a complete about-face for the Trump administration concerning Ukraine, clearly wasn't written by Trump. Trump doesn't write his Truth Social post. Now, we already had an idea of this. Someone from Trump 1.0 has already come out and said, well, we used to write these tweets, and then he would say what needed to be capitalized or whatever, what needed to be, how they could be Trumpified, I guess. But I keep talking about how Trump is not running the White House. He's not sorting out policy. He's not interested in policy. He doesn't really understand the policy. He certainly isn't really working on peace deals with himself, with Israel and Hamas, say, and the Palestinians. This is another example of the situation where someone's written a Truth Social post for Donald Trump, and then he receives a note in the middle of a meeting saying, you need to approve this Truth Social post that we've written for you so you can announce the deal first. We want you to be the one that announces this deal so you get the plaudits for it, even though the deal probably wasn't done by you. You weren't aware of any of the intricacies of the deal. We are just announcing it ourselves through your Truth Social media platform so that you get recognition. It's just, yeah. Now, talking we're almost there for today. New polling on American support for Ukraine is good news. Note the GOP stats here, says Michael Weiss. 86% of Republicans want more sanctions on Russia. Yes, that absolutely needs to happen. 66%. And in fact, a Serbian bank or some Serbian entity has been fully sanctioned by the US, we understand. So, yeah, you can do it. You were doing it and then you stopped doing it. Please get back to that because your supporters want you to do that. 86% of Republicans want more sanctions on Russia. 66% support tariffs on nations buying Russian oil and gas. 73% of Republicans back providing Ukraine with weapons. It is all there for you. So this is a Harris poll Harvard Harris poll looking at Republicans and others, but those Republican stats are really, really good news. That's what we want to see. He would drive support along with him. Republican supporters, Republican voters would definitely support whatever you did on Ukraine. You just need to do the right thing because they would be pulled along after. Whatever you do, they would support. So do the right thing. Right, Defense Intelligence of Ukraine has released data on 178 Ukrainian cultural artifacts stolen by Russians. Most of them, 140 artifacts, were stolen during illegal excavations in Crimea, in particular in the Tuareg Chezonizi. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation, at the Kadzikivska Hill Fort and in the Church of St. John the Baptist. Another 37 exhibits were taken by the occupiers in 2023 from the Kamiana Mohyla Museum and transported to a Crimean museum under the guise of a temporary exhibition. Quote, by appropriating Ukrainian culture and history, Russia is trying to erase Ukrainian national identity and legalize its aggression and occupation. Documenting crimes is a first step toward establishing justice and holding all perpetrators accountable, the DIU said. And then finally, a bit of happy news here for you. Kremlin's anti-West propaganda film. This is a film that cost $1.8 million to make, I presume. So it's not a hugely expensive film, to be honest, in the whole scheme of filmmaking. But it is only taken £845 at the box office. And it has been pulled. I think, so unfortunately, it's I can't read this on here now, but I was able to read this yesterday. I think it was averaging 3 people per sitting in the cinema. And after 3 weeks, I think, they pulled it. £845 it made. It's an absolute disaster. It's about this imaginary country in Europe of Franglia, where it's just propaganda nonsense, absolute nonsense. But I love the fact that it completely bombed. It only sold 192 tickets in its first weekend. It's a movie called Tolerance, and everyone thinks it's shite. So stick that one in your pipe and smoke it. That's enough for me. Take care, everybody, and I will speak to you soon. Really appreciate your support with Car for Ukraine. I believe we're doing a 12-hour mega campaign fundraiser for this tomorrow with Silicon Curtain. I don't know if I'm going to be hosting it as well in parallel for the full 12 hours. As I told you yesterday, unfortunately, I do have to go out for 4 hours in the evening to the cinema and out for a meal with my missus. That was poorly timed to coincide with this. So I may not be around for my own, for large parts of the live stream, but nonetheless, there we go. Just a massive. Oh no, this isn't our. I need to get to my one. ATPGEO.com/donate takes you to this homepage for the Car for Ukraine fundraiser. We are now over 14,000. Any extra help would be really appreciated. Thanks to Gary Yearsley again for helping out, and Javier Alvarez, good to have you on board as well. Javier, haven't heard from you for some time, so thank you, supporting the heroes, keeping us safe in the EU with Ukraine until victory. And Ben Hosh as well. Legends one and all. Really appreciate your support. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon.